In this episode, we're setting up Metahuman face and other character animations for our upcoming cutscene. Hey guys, today we're setting up the final piece of what we need before we record our cutscene. So the first episode was 2 episodes ago. That's when we set up the tentacle animation blueprint. Last episode was all about how do we integrate the actual gameplay, like the tentacle reaching out and grabbing our character. And for this episode, it's the reaction to that. It's like, how is our character going to realistically react to that tentacle coming out and grabbing them? Because really, if we're doing a character death cutscene, in order to be convincing in any regard, the character's gonna need to react to his impending doom. But there's a few other pieces to it other than just the facial animation, right? Because you saw how our character actually turned his head to where the tentacle's coming. And then as the tentacle's reaching around, we want him to turn to actually look at that. And the last thing is we want to pull our character's arms into his body, because if the tentacle realistically wraps around his upper body, his arms are going to be pulled in tight to his chest. So we're going to set all that up this episode, and by the end of this episode, we're going to be ready to hit the ground running with our cutscene next episode. So here are the key concepts for today. And I'm going to show you, even without Control Rig and even without the Live Link Face app, you could still do a ton of Metahuman facial animation just with what Metahuman comes with out of the box. And the other thing we're covering this episode that you haven't seen before in the series is how to rekey animations. And anytime I say rekeying an animation, all that means is that we're making slight updates to animations just in order to make it work for what we need. So an example of that is we got a run or a walk animation and our character needs to turn its head to the left or to the right. Very simple to do with rekeying. So let's get to it. Alright, so we're going to start today by recording our Metahuman face animation, and I'm going to do this directly on the BP adversary character we set up all the way back in, I think it was episode 48, actually episode 45, but you could do this on any Metahuman character, won't matter, it's going to work just fine. So we're going to start by going to our content drawer, over to content, and into our Metahumans folder, I'm going to create a brand new folder here, new folder, and I'm going to call it face animations. And then also we're going to create our very first sequences folder back in content. So over in content, create a new folder called sequences. And then within sequences, I'm going to create another new folder, and this is going to be titled level sequences. And we're really going to get into level sequences next episode. But for today, a level sequence is what we're going to use to make our Metahuman face animation. So we'll go into that folder and right click, and under cinematics here, create a new level sequence. And I'm going to title this Tentacle Grab Face Animation 1. And anytime you're recording any new animation or any new scene in Unreal Engine, it's going to be with a level sequence. So we'll go into that. And it opens up Sequencer here. And Sequencer unto itself, it's its own giant entity. And I am the furthest thing from an expert in Sequencer, but I'm going to show you the basics, and we're really going to get into it a lot next episode. It's one of those things, just like making a scene from scratch. You just need to do it a ton. And as you do it over and over and over again, it gets faster and faster. You learn tips and tricks. I found that I just got much better at using Sequencer over the course of preparing for really the next episode. All right, so to record our facial animation, the first thing we need to do is we need to add a character, a Metahuman character, to Sequencer. And for that, I really need a Metahuman character in the world. So if you don't have your adversary AI character in the world, we're going to move him into the world. So I'll go back to content, and if you're not following this series, you'll need to move your character into the world from the Metahumans folder. If you're following this series, you know exactly what we're doing. So you go to Core, AI, and we're going to take our BP adversary AI character, and boom. Doesn't matter where he is in the world, but somewhere around there, totally fine. And then under Sequencer here, we can just go to plus track, actor to Sequencer, and we can choose add our BP adversary AI character if he's already selected in the viewport. If he's not selected in the viewport, you could just search for him here. But I'm just going to say add BP adversary AI character. And when you do that, the adversary AI character gets added to Sequencer, but he's immediately into a T-pose. I'm just going to adjust my camera speed. Actually, it's not called a T-pose anymore, right? Because it's not really a T. I don't know what the new pose is called. And the very first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go into this blueprint and make some updates to it so that it's a little bit easier to see our face. Because right now we have a camera sticking out of our face. So let's go back to the outliner. Let's edit BP adversary AI character here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide our mesh. So if I go over to the viewport, so if you followed all the way back in episode 45, we're doing runtime retargeting of our mannequin skeleton over to our Metahuman. And because of that, I got our mesh showing up when we're not actually playing, when we're not simulating. So what I can do, I can just hide the mesh. We're going to be able to see his face a little bit more easily. So I can search for visible here, and I can uncheck that. And then the one other change I'm going to make is the first person camera over here for our adversary AI character. So I can come down here to our FPP camera boom, and what I'm going to do is just search for our target arm length. I'm going to make this 100. And that'll put the camera behind his head, so that way it's not blocking our animation recording. So compile and save our BP adversary AI character, and we'll go back over to the sequencer. And now our character is ready to be animated, looking pretty. So getting close for this next part. So I put his face all the way on the left-hand side of the viewport, so I have space on the right. Now you heard me say we can do these facial animations without using control rig, which is this over here. And the way we're going to do that is with poses over here on the left. But before we do that, I just want to give you a quick crash course in some basics of sequencer. So by default, the sequencer recording is 5 seconds here. And the reason I know it's 5 seconds is because it's recording at 30 frames per second, and we've got a total of 150 frames here. So the red line denotes where sequencer recording is going to end, and the green denotes where sequencer recording is going to start. And this mark indicates where our sequencer recording actually is now. If we go ahead and we hit play, then, well, it's going to do absolutely nothing because our metahuman's just sitting there. But I can bring it back to the green. The other thing I like doing is holding control using the mouse wheel, and you can zoom out, and then you could extend this. If you want a much longer sequence, you could extend it out indefinitely. But I think keeping it to 5 seconds for now is perfect. That's the perfect length for our facial animation. And we're going to cover a lot more of this next episode, where we export a sequence out to an AVI file, and I know that's not the appropriate way to do it because the experts in this tell me I need to use EXR files, but I'm doing it the simplest way possible. But anyway, we're going to get to that next episode. And one question commonly is, why are we recording at 30 FPS? Shouldn't we change this to 60 frames per second or even more? And you'll see, regardless of the FPS of the recording of animations, that they blend seamlessly when they're actually executed in the world. But character animations in a game are almost always 30 FPS. But if you go up here, you see 12 FPS for animation, and what that's really referring to is cartoons. I saw an interesting YouTube video, and I'll link it in the description below, but it pointed out why most traditional animation is filmed at 12 FPS. But since we're talking about in-game cutscenes, we're going to keep it at 30 FPS. That's going to be just fine. All right, so now let's give our character here some facial animation. And you heard me say that Metahuman comes with a lot of facial animations right out of the box, and I found that stitching them together at the right intervals, it created a pretty nice looking facial animation sequence. So to do that, we're going to go over to poses here on the left hand side, and it should open this control rig pose window here. And if you have a second screen, you could put this over to your second screen, but I just had it right next to my character's face here, and it worked great. So we've got to go back to content, and then under content, we're going to go to metahumans, and then common, two common folders, into the pose library, into face, into expressions, and voila, we now have facial expressions. And these are all control rig poses. So think of a pose as a series of controls. And I got to back up even further. So each control within the face, it controls a variety of different bones, muscles, basically a whole bunch of values from 0 to 1 that are controlling a variety of different parts of the face. So if the character blinks, then it's not only going to control the eyes, but also kind of the eyelids, the area around the eyes. And we covered a lot of this back in episode 47, but that was an hour-long episode. And the basics of it is that each of those controls are controlling one particular aspect of the face. And then the control rig pose takes all those controls that are relevant for that particular expression, and it brings it into one existing moment in time. So what we can do is we can actually take each of those poses, and at specific time intervals here, we can say, okay, at this moment in time, be a stern face. At this moment in time, be a happy face. So we're going to start with a base pose at time 0 of anger 01 sternness. And the way we do this is we select anger 01 sternness there, and then we select controls over here. And when you select controls, it should automatically copy all the controls in your metahuman here. And then we select key. So key here, that's going to actually put a key, basically put a marker of what each of those controls is doing at that moment in time in order to get this specific pose. And then paste pose. And instantly you should see your character's face, well, become a little bit sterner. Now the hardest part of this is figuring out at what point in the sequence to put this specific pose you need. And I don't have any great tips and tricks for this because really you're lining up a body animation, like what's going on in the world, with that specific facial pose. This took a lot of trial and error on my side just to get it lined up properly. So if anybody has any tips or tricks, please post them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. All right, so next we're going to go to the first marker here, this first little dot at 0.5. And then I'm going to select anger 2, indignation, and select controls. Make sure to select controls for each one of these. Otherwise, it's not going to change the controls that get that expression. And then after you select controls, paste pose. And what you're going to see is if you move your time marker from here to there, well, you see his facial expression changing over that course of time. And basically, I played with these to think what was realistic. Like as he saw the tentacle coming into him, he's going to get angry because we got to keep in mind, this is our adversary, right? He's already kind of an an angry dude. So on to the next pose. So come a little bit before 0015. So right about there, that's fine. And this is going to be alertness. So if we scroll down here and select surprise 01 alertness and then select controls, paste pose. Then I'm going to come over here to 0027 and the next one is going to be disgust disdain. So if we go up a little bit, it's disgust, not disgust here, but a little bit further, disgust 01 disdain. This one right here, select controls, paste pose. So he's going from angry to concerned to disdainful. And then very quickly at the 1 second mark here, so you got to keep in mind this is all happening in 1 second. This one he's going right back to anger. So this one right here, anger 03 anger, select control, paste pose. But then, and all this is happening right as the tentacle's coming around and grabbing him. So just a tiny bit out, so right about here, 0034. Then I'm going to scroll back down to surprise shock. So this one right here. This is where tentacles reaching around, he knows what's about to happen. Select controls, paste pose. Then right about here, 43, 44, something like that. That's good. This one is going to be classic fear. So we come up here to fear, right about there. His mouth's already open. Perfect. Select controls, paste pose. And this is where he's actually being grabbed right here. Come a little bit further to about 48. That looks good. And right back down to surprise shock. Because at this point, this is when the tentacle is taking control. So select controls, paste pose. And then just maybe a quarter of a second after that, something like that, 0055. Then he's moving on from surprise shock to terror. So fear 04, terror. Select control, paste pose. You know, honestly, that doesn't look so much like terror. It looks like anguish. And then we come over here to about 0075. That's good. And this is the last one. So it's going to be sadness, grief. Select controls, paste pose. And he's going to have sadness, grief the rest of the time here. But you know what I'll do? I'll just change it slightly so that all the way at the end, we'll select sadness, sadness, just good old-fashioned sadness, select controls, paste pose. And now the moment of truth. So you can come all the way back to the beginning and hit play. And you'll notice that it plays a little bit fast, right? So I think we need to slow this down by maybe about 20 to 30%. So if I play it, he's just, yeah, his mouth's reacting very fast, which realistically, yeah, it might react that fast, but I think I just want to slow it down a little bit. So here's a tip and trick if you want to kind of slow down an overall animation here. So if we scroll up to the top, so for the face here, you have this bar, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring my time over to the green, and I'm just going to scroll out, and that's going to allow me to then get some more space over here on the right. I can move out our end time. I'm going to move that out to maybe like, let's do 210 there. So that's going to be 7 seconds instead of 5. And then what I can do is I could take this bar for our face up here, and I can just extend this out. And what that's going to do is it's just going to evenly extend out all of those keys down here. So then we can play it again and take a look. Yeah, the reactions are still pretty quick, but not quite as quick as they were. And by the way, you can always change the play rate of the montage or the anim sequence. We're going to end up baking this to an anim sequence, but then converting it into a montage. And so if we still don't like it, we could change the play rate after the fact. But I think the key here is to get the spacing between each of these different expressions correct. The other thing I should mention here is if you mess up a specific key, like a particular moment in time, and you realize, I want to change that particular moment, what you can do is select the very top one, come down, 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 down to the bottom. And you know what I just realized? We have 2 faces on our adversary AI character. So what you need to make sure to do if you did this with me, make sure you extend out the right face. So if you come down here to face 0, you can extend this out as well. And I think that's the one that's actually being animated here. So yeah, then we could test it out. Yep, there we go. So the 2 separate faces, long story with that, but in short, I wanted to do facial animations on the third-person character, and maybe I shouldn't have done it that way, but eventually our third-person character will have a real face. All right, back to how to change a specific set of keys in a line. And actually, I haven't found a good keyboard shortcut for this. The best thing I've found is to click and drag all the way down. But the problem is there are a ton of keys, and it just takes some finagling to go back and forth and back and forth. And so again, this is an ask for help. Is there an easier way of selecting a line of keys than what I'm doing right here? And sometimes I can get it, but the dragging is tedious. There is an Unreal Engine cheat sheet of sequencer shortcuts that you can check out in the description below. All right, so at this point, we are ready to bake the animation. So let's come up to the top and we'll select our face. So right click on face up here, and we're going to bake animation sequence. And I'm just going to save this under Metahumans and then our face animations right here. And we'll call this our tentacle grab face animation 1 anim sequence. And we don't need to change any of these properties here on the export. Just say export to animation sequence. You should get a little pop-up up here on the right. I know you can't see that because my face is there. It says 1 anim sequence asset created. So we should be all set here. So let's close out a sequencer. And then we can go back to our content drawer, back to content, back to Metahumans, face animations, and there it is. And we can see it in real time. So now we have to integrate this facial animation with the entire death experience. So first, we're going to create an anim montage for this sequence, and that's what we're actually going to play when our character gets grabbed. So I'm going to right-click here and say create anim montage. And we can name it tentacle grab face animation instead of anim sequence. Just take out that piece. It's just going to be animation montage. So now we need to add a trigger to our tentacle at some point in the process of the tentacle coming out and grabbing the character. We need a trigger to the target that's starting a facial animation that's reflecting the fact that a giant tentacle just rose out of the water and is about to grab them. So we'll go back to content, back over to characters, tentacle. And first I'll open up the tentacle grab 1 anim sequence. So right at frame 11, right about here, I'm going to right click and we're going to add a notify, new notify, and we're going to call this target awareness. Target awareness. So we'll save this one and then we'll open up tentacle grab 2 anim sequence. So this one, same kind of thing, but we're going to do it at frame 20. So right click, add notify, new notify, target awareness. So we can save this, we can close out of that. And then we've got to open up our tentacle ABP here. I'm going to zoom out of the event graph because we got to take what we set up last episode, anim notify grab character, anim notify fade out. I'm going to move that down a little bit because we're going to create space for the target awareness. Anim notify target awareness. And what we're going to do here is get our tentacle character reference, get tentacle character. From there, we're going to get our tentacle target, and we set this up last episode. And from here, we're going to cast to BP third person character because that's our character class. Connect this up. And this is basically verifying that the tentacle target is in fact a character. From our third person character, we're going to get a reference to our face animation blueprint. And if you're not following this series, you'll have to set this up, but get our face anim BP ref. And then from our face, we can do a very simple montage play. And connect that up from here to there. And the montage to play is our tentacle grab face animation 1 montage. We're going to keep this at in play rate 1. If we need to change that, we can. So let's compile and save. And I'm going to close out of both of these blueprints just so that our performance in this test is pretty good. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to zoom out with a higher camera speed. I'm going to position our adversary AI character kind of down the beach, but in the water. So I want the adversary AI character to run towards the gameplay ability pickups over here, but have to run through the water, and then the footsteps are going to do their thing. And I keep mispronouncing tentacle. I have to remember to enunciate. All right, right about there, I'm going to readjust my camera speed down to about 3, and that way we can follow him as the tentacle comes out to grab him. And let's simulate. 51, 72, tentacle summoned any moment now. We could just follow his face. Yep, so we saw that shocked look on his face the moment just before he got grabbed. But there's still a couple of problems here. And the first one is that realistically, if the tentacle is coming out to the side like that, I think he would notice something giant, something massive rising out of the water. So we need to turn his head. And ideally, the way I'd like to have this is that he turns his head towards the tentacle. And then as the tentacle is wrapping around the other side, he turns his head to the other side. And that's when the shocked look really comes over his face. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to record a brand new animation off of the idle animation, turn toward the left, then turn toward the right. And we can play that animation just at the neck and above in conjunction with whatever other animation's going on. So you'll see how this all comes together. Let's start by going to our content drawer, back to content. We're going to go into characters, mannequins, animations, and then Manny. And we'll duplicate the idle here. So right click and then duplicate. And we'll call it idle look right, then left. And we'll go into that. And I'll pause the animation here because as you can see, it's just a typical idle animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to rekey 3 specific bones. So I'm going to collapse the clavicle L, clavicle R, and that brings us to the 3 that we're rekeying. So neck 01, neck 02, and head. And the very first thing we need to do to rekey an animation is we need to set a baseline. Like where is that animation going to be when we want the change to start? So I'm going to move this to frame 6. So right about there, and we'll select each of these. And then up here on the toolbar, we'll we'll select key. And what that does is it saves where that bone is at that moment in time according to this curve. And it's the entire transform. It's not just the location, but it's also the rotation. I think it's also the scale too, although I've never made the neck go, that would be a little weird. Okay, next 02, key. And last but not least, head, key. All right, so at frame 15, so frame 6 is where it's going to start to animate, and then at frame 15, this is where we want his head turned fully to the right. And the way I got 9 frames between those, it was just a lot of trial and error. But if you think about it in terms of number of frames per second in an animation, about 30 frames a second, so it takes about 1/3 of a second to move his neck like that. And he's going to move his head and neck pretty quick once he realizes what's up. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at next 01 and make sure you're in rotation mode here. And with this axis here, I'm just going to turn it slightly to the right, right about there. And not all the way, because keep in mind, we're going to turn all 3 of these bones. So just to the point where it looks relatively natural, but you do want it turned quite a bit, and then key. And then you'll see that curve down here reflects the change that we just made. And then I'm going to select next 02, and we'll turn that a little bit more. And for next 02, I'm actually going to turn it's slightly down as well. So this axis right here. And this is more art than science. You just got to turn to a point where you think it's realistic. And then key. And last but not least, our head. And keep in mind, our body here is turned a little bit to the left. Wow, I got to change my camera speed. Okay, down to 2. And yeah, so that's kind of straight on the body. So the head, we can turn that a little bit more, and down just a little bit. So that looks good. We'll hit key. So that's a realistic turn to the right. So he's not going to turn all the way. Wouldn't make sense. All right, so now that his head is turned to the right, he's going to be running for some small period of time. I'm thinking about 1 second, where he's just kind of watching the tentacle as it approaches. And this is the part of the facial animation where he's angry. Like at first, he's not considering it a threat. And so to do this for 1 second, we have to go to keyframe 45. So we'll go to 45 here. And there's one thing, I think this is a new change for Unreal Engine 5, but it used to be the case when you hit key, it preserved whatever the last thing was. But now whenever you hit key, if you don't actually change like rotation or something, it goes right back to default position, which to be honest, I find really convenient. But to keep this animation, like to keep him turned to the right this entire time, what we have to do is we just have to turn slightly, turn right back to 0, then hit key. And then it preserves that exact space. Because let me show you what happens if we don't do that. So if I select next 02 and just hit key, it turns back to normal position for next 02. So if you do that by accident, you just hit Control Z, and then we can go right back to frame 45. All right, so we got our next 02 over to the right, and then I can turn it slightly to the left, slightly to the right, and then key again. And all we're doing here is preserving that right turn neck for 1 second. So I selected next 01 now, and turn it slightly to the left, slightly to the right, and key again. And by the way, you could even change these slightly if you wanted to. So for example, if you want to turn this maybe slightly back to the center and key, just so it's a very subtle neck movement, I think that'd be totally fine. So now we're going to go to frame 50, so only 5 frames after, which is a very short amount of time. So that's roughly, what, like 1/5 of a second? And this is where his neck's going to snap back to the middle and then over to the left. But we want to do a keyframe right at the middle here at 50. So for that, we don't need to adjust any rotation or anything. We just hit key, and next 02, key, and then head and key, and he's right back to normal. And we see the curves down here reflecting that. So keep in mind, at this point in the animation, the tentacle is going to be whipping around his body. So we want his head turned to the left very, very quickly. So I'm going to move over to frame 55 here. And what we're going to do, same thing we did when we turned to the right. Turn this one slightly to the left, something like that, maybe a little bit down, and then key. Next 02, same kind of thing, slightly to the left, little bit down, key. And finally the head, slightly to the left, little bit down, key. And then 60, he's going to turn right back to the front again. So we'll just hit key 3 times. Key, next 02, key, next 01, key. So we are all set with this animation. So I'm going to save this. And what I'm going to do is we're going to need to come back to this and drag it into our anim graph. But let's go over back to our anim graph. So under content, core, and ABP third person character here. And we'll go over to our anim graph. So this right here. So the anim graph is bringing together all of our animations. So because this is a death animation, I really want the head and neck part of this to be the very last thing that's applied after all other animations. So regardless of whether he's jumping, running, walking, idling while the tentacle grabs him, still want him to do the neck turn. And so the way we're going to handle that is I'm going to put it all the way at the end here, right before the output pose. So what we're going to do is drag out from here, and we're going to do a layered blend per bone. And then we can navigate back over to our animation. So we'll go back to characters, mannequins, animations, Manny, drag in idle, look right, then left, drag it in there, connect this up right here. And there's a couple other pieces that we need to get this up and running. So in the layered blend per bone, you heard me say I only want this at neck 01 and up. So in the layer setup here, expand index, we're going to add a branch filter, expand that index, and we're going to put our neck 01. That's our bone name there, and we're getting that from this exact bone name right here. And then if we go back to ABP third person character, we have to set the blend depth to 1. And what this does is it blends outwards, like it blends to child bones versus the other way around. Now the last thing here, this blend weight 0, we can't have this be set to 1 because then it's always going to do this. What we need is a new variable that's going to tell it when to blend. So we'll come down here on the left under variables, plus sign. I'll name it look right, then left. And this is going to be a float. So change it over to float. Take our look right then left variable, get, and connect it up here. By default, it's going to be 0, so it's only going to do this top line here. So compile and save. Now the last thing is we need to change this variable to 1 when our character, our target, becomes aware of the tentacle. So for that, we got to go back to our content drawer, back to content, characters, tentacle, ABP tentacle, for our target awareness event. So over here after the montage begins playing, so this is where we're going to set this variable here, the look right then left. But in order to set that variable, we first need to get a reference to AsBP third person character right here, and we need to get our AnimBP reference. So get AnimBP reference. I'm just going to position that right underneath the montage here. And from the AnimBP reference, we should be able to get the look right then left variable, and we're going to set that. And the setting is going to be from 0, which is nothing, to 1, which is the full head and neck animation. And it's only doing that above the neck because we're using this layer blend per bone. All right, moment of truth. We are ready to test this. I'm going to keep this stuff open, but same position. Let's simulate. So what we should see now is he should start looking to the left when the tentacle comes. There he goes. And to the right, and boom. And yeah, he's all set. But we still have the other side to think about, right? Because the problem is if he's running along the ocean this way, like the way he's facing now, then he's facing the correct direction because he can just look to the right and the tentacle's there. But if he's running along the ocean the other direction, it's not going to make sense. Like he's looking inward toward the island then. So we need a second animation. And there might be a more programmatic way to do this, but for me, if there's just 2 animations, let's just make the second one, and then we could do a simple switch and play the right animation depending on if the tentacle's to his left or his right, which is a little complicated, but not too bad. So let's take care of that. So for the second animation, we're going to do the same thing we just did for idle. So let's go back to content, characters, mannequins, animations, Manny. You're going to know this folder really well. Right click on idle and duplicate. And this one is going to be idle look left, then right. And we'll go into that. So once again, we'll set our baseline keys. And really, I don't mind doing this a second time because honestly, this is a good skill to have. So neck 01, key, neck 02, key, head, key. The more you do this kind of stuff, the faster it'll get. Now, same kind of thing. So we'll go to frame 15, and one little thing about this. So don't turn his neck to the left quite as much as you did to the right. And I don't know why that is, but I suspect it's because his neck here is already positioned somewhat in a leftward direction. I just found it looks better if we didn't turn it quite as much. So maybe about here and a little bit down and key. Neck 02, very slightly, just about there, and down and key. And then the head, maybe just a notch or 2. Yeah, right about there. And down and key. And by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier, but if you want to change your snap amounts, so divisions of 360 here, you could just change that 2.8 like I have here. Should have mentioned that all the way in the start. If you can forgive me, then we'll continue onward. So let's go to frame 45. And again, we'll do the same trick where we turn it slightly, turn it right back, and key. That's going to preserve his head movement to the left. Then neck 02, same kind of thing. 1 and back and key. And then neck 01, same thing. 1 back to there and key. Over to frame 50. This is where his head's whipping around. Key, neck 02, key, and head, key. Over to frame 55. So we're going to turn to the right. And neck 01 over this way. And a little bit more for this one because it's moved over to the right. Head a little bit down and over, just about there, key. And neck 02, just about there. And 1 down and key. And head, same kind of thing, over slightly and down and key. Last one, frame 60, just 3 keys. Key, key, key. So we'll save this. We'll go back to our ABP third person character. I'm going to move this out a little bit further. really unsophisticated here. I'm just taking this exact setup, pasting it, connecting this up here, connecting this here. Going to go back to our content drawer. We're going to drag in the look left, then right. This is right, then left. We're going to drag in look left, then right here. Delete out this one and connect this one here. The last thing is we need a new variable. So we need to duplicate this variable and we're going to call it look left, then right. Also a float. And we'll drag that in. Make sure you got these right. Connect this up. I should say correct. Make sure you have these correct. And the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight all of these, comment. We're going to call it head look for ocean tentacle death. Okay, now we have a challenge because now we have to determine, is the tentacle to the right side of the character or is the tentacle to the left side of the character? Which way should he turn his head? And I got to give credit to Zombie Chemist here in the forums. And although this response is all the way back in March of 2015, it still works for me. And if you're following this series, you know I'm the furthest thing from a math expert. So whenever we have a math problem, fundamentally a direction or a vector problem, this is what I do. I go to the forums and most likely someone smarter than me has already figured out the math for these problems. So I was thinking about doing this on our animation blueprint here, like just creating a pure function to determine is the target to the left or the right. And we could do that, but I was thinking that this might be useful in a variety of situations in the future. So what I mean by that is in the future, we might have two objects, one over here, and we might want to compare, is that object to the left of the other object or to the right? And so I realized this is a perfect use case for a blueprint function library because it's a function we might want to use in a variety of circumstances. So I'm going to go back to our content drawer, back to content, into blueprint function libraries. And right in the main folder here, I'm going to create a new blueprint function library. So under blueprints, blueprint function library. And I'm going to call it general functions. General functions. And we'll go into that. And I'm going to call this function actor checked is on right side, question mark. And I thought about making two different functions, one for right, one for left, but really we just need one because if we're not going to turn to the right, I'll just have his neck turn to the left and we're just fine. So the first thing is we're going to make it a pure function because all it's going to do is return whether or not it's to the left or to the right. But we need a couple inputs to go into this function. And our first input is what actor is being checked. And our second is what actor is doing the checking. So I'll do a plus sign over here for inputs. Our first one is actor to check, and it's going to be not a Boolean, it's going to be an actor. Right down here, object type, object reference. And then we'll do another one, and this is going to be the actor doing the checking. If you come up with better variable names, let me know. But that's also going to be an actor. And then we're also going to have an output. So plus sign here, and our output is going to be on right side, question mark, and that is going to be a Boolean. So we can move out our return node because we need some space here. Compile and save this. So again, we're doing vector maths here, dot products, and you can look this up online. The exact forum post is linked in the description below, but I'm just going to set it up and it works. So actor to check, we are going to get actor rotation. And then from the actor rotation, we're going to get the right vector, not the wrong vector. And then also from the actor to check over here, we're going to get actor location for this one. And then we're going to get actor location from the actor doing the checking. Get actor location. Put them right side by side. And then from the actor to check, we are going to get the unit direction. So what direction is it facing? All right, between these two things, we are getting the dot product. And to be honest, I have not done enough math, calculus, Wolfram Alpha, but this is the dot product. And whew, way over my head. We're not going to worry about that. All right, so back to this. We are going to get the vector length. Don't search for the get, just search for vector length and just duplicate that. So we have two of them. Connect the second one to this. And then we got to multiply these two vector lengths. So right there, multiply. And then from the dot product, we have to divide from the multiply. And then from here, we have to get the inverse cosine, also known as the arc sine. It's the A cosine. Yeah, this one. In degrees, the inverse cosine in degrees, and then we're checking to see, okay, is that inverse cosine, that arc cosine, is it less than 90? Is it less than 90 degrees? And if it's less than 90 degrees, then it is on the right side. So for any math geniuses out there, if you post a more detailed description in the comments below, I would be greatly appreciative. So if you got all this, if your logic looks sound, compile and save. Make sure it's also a pure function here. And then we can exit out of this. We can go back to our AVP tentacle event graph. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, move these down, make a little bit more space, move this out, because right after montage play, we have to get our tentacle character reference. From there, we're going to get our tentacle target. And then we can call our wonderful pure function. So drag out a pin, actor checked is on right side. So that's the actor to check. And the actor doing the checking is our tentacle. So it's this right here. All right, I'm going to put in a reroute for our AnimBP reference because we're going to move this. You know what? I'm just going to get rid of that preview instance. I'm going to move this over, move both of these over, and then we can do a branch off of on right side here and connect up our branch. All right, so AnimBP reference, I'm going to put that right here. We're going to connect up look right then left to be 1 to the true. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a reroute just for convenience and drag out a pin from this. And we're going to get look left then right. We're going to set that. We're going to make sure that that one is set to 0. It should be set to 0 already, but just good practice. And that way both of these animations will never be playing simultaneously. So I'll copy both of these, paste them down below. We're just going to switch them up. So this is 0, this one's 1. Make sure to connect up the reroute to each one of them. So this one to here, and then make sure to connect up the false to here. So you should have 4 pins coming out of this, and then the false should be connected up to these 2. 1, 0 up here, and then 0, 1 down here. I'm going to move this up here. I'm going to put another reroute in, me and my reroutes, and connect this up like this. Whew, much cleaner. Compile and save. All right, let's test this out one more time. So we'll start on the right side of gameplay abilities, and then we'll move them over to the other side. Test out the other way. Tentacle coming, turns to the side. Boom. Yep, looks good. So let's test it out on the other side now. Over here, spin him around just so he sees the gameplay abilities. That looks good. 49, 71, 87 tentacles summoned. Is he going to look correctly? Yep, he looked to the right side and then yank. And everything's good except the end animation there. And also the fact that his arms, when the tentacle actually grabs him, his arms are still kind of out free. And so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to set our character's arms to be pulled in close to his chest. Because realistically, tentacle grabs him, his arms are going to be pulled tight. So just like we have been doing, let's go right back to our characters, mannequins, animations, Manny. We're going to duplicate Idle one last time. Duplicate, and we're going to title this one Arms Held Inward. And we'll go into that. And this one is actually going to be very, very simple. So we got to come up here. I'm going to start underneath clavicle L, this upper arm L. All we're going to do, get nice and close, move it in slightly like this, but obviously it's not going to work if it's sitting in his pelvis. So let's move it out right about there, actually outward just a tiny bit more, something like that. So it's realistic. Yep, that'll do just fine. So we'll key that, and then we'll do the same thing for upper arm R here. So move it a little bit inward, this one a little bit forward, just like that, and key. Looks like he, or she in this case, is wearing some handcuffs, but nope, just a tentacle. So now we have to transition over to this animation, at least for the upper body when our character gets grabbed. And luckily, we already have a mechanism for doing that, because if we go back to our animation blueprint, we already have the dead Boolean that we set up last episode. So what we're going to do is go over to our state machine. So anim graph here, go into our locomotion state machine. And let me actually back up for a moment to main states, because what we did last episode is that everything here is transitioning back to locomotion if our character dies. So that's this right here. So that's why we're going into locomotion. So from idle or walk run, this is where we're going to transition to the idle arms held inward. So I can just drag in this, and if I go into that, so I'll double click, select this, and we are going to loop that animation if it's playing. Now right now it's not yet going to be playing because we haven't hooked it up, but very simple here. We could just go from our idle to there and this to this. I'm going to set these both to be, let's say 0.5 seconds, and the transition rules are as simple as you can get. So all we're going to do is take our dead Boolean, drag it in, get, connect this up. Same thing back in our other one. So if he's walking or running, same thing. He's still going to be dead. Get dead and can enter transition. Compile and save. So one last thing here, just in order to get this playing appropriately. So we have to go back to our third person character blueprint. And the reason is that last episode we set up the character death ocean function. If we go back to that, and there we're ragdolling everything above spine 04, and that includes our arms. Now it's not fully simulated because over here on the left, right here, we got physics blend weight 0.5, but it's simulated enough such that the arms are not going to be pulled in tight. So what I'm going to do is instead of spine 04 here, I'm just going to transition that to neck 01. Neck underscore 01 and include the self. So it's going to include that first bone of the neck and work its way up. And then over here on the right, we're going to do the same thing over here. So this is going to be neck 01 and include self. Compile and save this. And let's do one final test. I'm going to close out of everything so it'll be decent performance. And let's simulate. And the only lingering issue that I still see is as the tentacle is pulling him into the depths, he's kind of funky, right? Like he turns over to the left a little bit, and that's having to do with the positioning of the socket relative to the tentacle. And I played with a variety of options to fix that, and I didn't come up with anything great. And I have some ideas, and maybe we'll do this in 2 episodes when we finish this out. But I don't think it's going to matter for the cutscene next episode, because really that cutscene is going to be in those moments when he's grabbed. And it doesn't really become an issue until about 2 or 3 seconds after that. But if you have any ideas, I'm all ears, so post them in the comments below. We're already at a B+, and that's my standard, and further up and further in. Let's go. So to quickly finish out the episode, guys, all we've got is a little variable cleanup. So let's go back to content chart core folder, ABP third person character here. And we've got 3 variables I want to classify. So dead, look right then left, and look left then right. And I'm just going to categorize them under death animations. And we're going to do that for all 3. Compile and save. So that concludes our episode for today. And in our next episode, we're finally making cutscenes. So I'll see you there.